Upsets like this one just aren't supposed to happen. 1 month ago, Sean Strickland upset Khamzat Chimaev to win the UFC middleweight title. And now, most people were picking Khamzat to win that fight. But leading up to that fight, people were saying, Sean Strickland, he has superior defensive wrestling than Dricus du Plessis. There's a chance that if he's able to survive the first round, Khamzat Chimaev might gas out, and then Sean Strickland might pick him apart on the feet. Not a lot of people believe that Sean Strickland could do it, but the upset ended up playing out in the way that an upset should play out on paper. When Petr Yan beat Merab Dvalishvili to win the bantamweight title, that was also a big upset. But that upset also made some sense, since Petr is an incredibly well-rounded fighter who has the fight IQ to target Merab's weakness, which is body shots, and because there was some talk at the time about how Merab was fighting too many 5-round title fights in a single year. And then there's this upset. Ilia Topuria losing to 38-year-old Justin Gaethje. And not just losing, getting picked apart over the course of 4 rounds. Getting dropped badly in the third, likely having both orbital bones smashed, and then having his brother stop the fight at the end of the 4th round. And this is just one of those upsets that makes you go and say, MMA as a sport makes no sense whatsoever. Ilia Topuria was coming off of what was arguably the greatest 3-fight KO win streak in UFC history. He knocked out Alexander Volkanovski, who was previously undefeated at featherweight. He then went on to KO Max Holloway, who not only hadn't been KO'd before, but was coming off of that brutal highlight reel KO win over Justin Gaethje himself at UFC 300. And then Ilia Topuria moved up to lightweight and knocked out Charles Oliveira, who also has a first-round submission win over Justin Gaethje with total ease. In contrast, Justin Gaethje, the guy was only coming off of 2 wins. And almost everybody agreed that Justin Gaethje didn't even deserve this title shot, and that Arman Tsarukyan should have gotten the shot instead. Justin Gaethje was supposed to be a layup. Ilia was supposed to have the advantage in every facet of mixed martial arts. He'd already KO'd 2 opponents that had finished Gaethje in the past. And based upon how Gaethje looked in his last fight against Paddy Pimblett, where, I'm going to be honest, both Paddy and Gaethje looked sloppy as hell, there's simply no way that you could have predicted Justin Gaethje to win this fight. And yet, here we are. Against all odds, Justin Gaethje has finally become an undisputed UFC champion. And then, in the co-main event, we saw Alex Pereira, who was on the verge of unprecedented greatness by challenging for a belt in a 3rd weight class, get knocked out by Ciryl Gane. And now, while that fight was a 50-50 matchup odds-wise, everybody I know was picking Alex to win, and the UFC was really counting on Alex to win this fight as well. So now, in this video, let's go over the results of the White House card and how they have broken the UFC. So, starting off with the main event, we had Justin Gaethje defeating Ilia Topuria due to 4th round TKO via corner stoppage, and, well, who could have seen this coming? As I said in the intro, this isn't an upset that should have happened. Ilia Topuria has knocked out and dominated fighters who have knocked out and submitted Justin Gaethje. Everybody was already considering this a significant step down in competition for Ilia compared to his previous 3 fights. I mean, Ilia Topuria knocked out Max Holloway right after Max Holloway went up to lightweight and then knocked out Justin Gaethje with that highlight reel finish at UFC 300. And both Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway and Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje, those were basically just pure striking fights, pure kickboxing fights in 4-ounce gloves. So everybody going to this fight between Ilia Topuria and Justin Gaethje saw this as a fight between an S-tier striker, one of the best strikers in the sport, perhaps one of the best strikers in the sport's history, versus an A or B-plus tier striker, like a very good striker, but not one of the greatest of all time. But well, yet again, MMA math proves that it doesn't work. So let's just go ahead and break this fight down round by round. In the first round, Justin Gaethje was already landing that jab. And here's the thing with Justin Gaethje. He tends not to jab early on in fights, even though his jab is probably his best weapon. And Trevor Whitman keeps on telling him, jab, find your distance with your jab. You know, your jab is money. He keeps on telling him that. But he doesn't jab until later on in the fight. However, when he does get his jab going, it's so fast and it's so hard to see that even, other elite strikers like Rafael Fiziev end up struggling with it. And that's what ended up happening here. As soon as the fight started, Ilia Topuria pressured Justin Gaethje up to the fence, and he had him there, right? But Ilia Topuria, he just didn't unload. He just didn't throw. He was just kind of standing there, and he was letting Justin Gaethje get to him with his jab on the back foot. And this is just me going off of Topuria's body language throughout that entire first round, but it seemed like Ilia Topuria, he was just looking for that one big knockout shot, while Justin Gaethje, on the other hand, he was finding his range with his jab, he was making sure to set up his shots, and he was only throwing those big winging hooks as a counter, right, when Topuria was coming in. I really do think that Ilia Topuria sort of drank his own Kool-Aid here, and ended up believing in his own power too much, and ended up just chasing the knockout way too much in the first round. He kept on looking for that one shot, for that one big overhand right, or that one big left hook, without ever jabbing or trying to feint to try and set that shot up. And this gave Gaethje the time to set up his own strikes, and crucially, make Ilia Topuria afraid of his power. And I distinctly remember this one uppercut that Gaethje caught Topuria with in the first round, this one rear uppercut that either heavily bruised or cut the space under Ilia's right eye. And it was at that moment that I knew that this fight, it was going to be a brawl. And Gaethje also said in a post-fight interview that as soon as he cut him open with that shot, Ilia Topuria started touching it. And I noticed that in the fight as well. Ilia Topuria, he kept on touching his face. At first, it looked like he was being defensively responsible and raising his guard, but if you go back and watch the fight, you'll see that Ilia Topuria does look genuinely worried for his facial integrity. And while it has been kind of a meme, there does seem to be some truth to the fact that there is this thing called the Justin Gaethje effect, where when Justin Gaethje hits guys, it seems to cause far more facial damage than when getting punched by somebody else. And feeling Justin Gaethje's power early on definitely affected Ilia Topuria mentally, because Ilia Topuria, prior to this fight, he was coming in with the expectations of securing that first round highlight reel KO. And it wasn't just the fans that were expecting that of him, but himself. And as soon as he realized that he wasn't going to be able to get that highlight reel KO without the risk of getting KO'd himself, because, you would have to brawl with Gaethje in the pocket, well, that's when I think his game plan just started to fall apart. And the two other things that I noticed from Ilia Topuria in the first round were, number one, he wasn't slipping and bobbing and weaving like he usually does. And while some of you may say, hey, that's because Ilia Topuria, he was off, this was an off night for him, and maybe that's the case, but I think that that was a tactical adjustment that Ilia Topuria made to avoid getting head kicked by Justin Gaethje. As anybody would tell you, the counter to that traditional boxing-style head movement is to throw head kicks and to throw knees. And Gaethje was throwing a few left high kicks early on in the fight to dissuade Ilia Topuria from doing his traditional bobbing and weaving and slipping. And then the second big thing that I noticed in this fight was the size difference. Ilia Topuria looked like a bantamweight next to Justin Gaethje. I don't know what it is, but Ilia Topuria looked much smaller than Justin Gaethje in there. Which is of course somewhat strange since Ilia Topuria, sure, he was outsized by Charles Oliveira, but the size difference didn't seem to be too huge there. And yeah, sure, Ilia Topuria, he was thicker than Justin Gaethje. He definitely had more muscle mass per square inch of his frame. But Justin Gaethje seemed so much longer than Ilia, and even longer than Charles. And I wanted to go and find an explanation as to why this might be the case, and why I'm sort of seeing this visual difference. And, well, I went back and watched the KO win that Ilia got over Charles, and in that fight, if you go and watch the KO sequence, Ilia Topuria jabs to the body, and sort of hunches Charles over a little bit, before setting up the KO blow. And in contrast, what Ilia was doing against Justin was, he was pressuring Justin up to the fence, and then he would wing a big right overhand, without setting up the shot with a body jab, or really any sort of jab at all. And then what Justin would do is just lean out of the way of that right overhand. He would just lean out of the way, and it would either miss him entirely, or take a lot of the sting off of that shot. But anyways, now moving on to the second round, this was the one round that Ilia Topuria won, and he nearly finished Justin Gaethje here, and he did so by getting Justin Gaethje up to the fence and then swarming him with body shots. He was going right hook to the body, left hook to the body, right hook, left hook, right hook, left hook. And eventually, he caught Justin Gaethje right on the liver with a shot that really hurt Gaethje and made Gaethje complain about his liver hurting after the fight as well. But the thing is, Ilia Topuria, he probably punched himself out going for that finish there. And I'm saying this based upon how he followed up after getting that knockdown. Because, yes, that was scored as a knockdown. After Ilia Topuria dropped Justin Gaethje with that body shot, he went in him out, and guess what he did? He threw 0 ground and pound, and instead, he went for a mounted triangle. Yes, a mounted triangle. Similar to what Khabib did against Justin Gaethje. And man, that was the moment when I knew that Ilia Topuria was cooked. Typically in MMA, you don't want to go for those sorts of submissions when you have a dominant position like mount. And that's because typically when you want to finish a mounted triangle, you need to give up mount. You need to turn to your back. And in the process of going for that mounted triangle, Justin Gaethje ended up slipping out and Ilia Topuria transitioned to armbar. And here's the thing with arm bars in MMA. You don't see many of them either. And that's because arm bars, those are a relatively low percentage submission in mixed martial arts, especially at the championship level. And that's because, in a lot of cases, fighters can just grit it out. Arm bars work by hyperextending the elbow joint, not by breaking the arm. And here's the thing. Fighters are used to enduring far worse injuries and far worse pain than a simple hyperextended arm. We saw Tony Ferguson grit it out against Charles Oliveira. We just saw on this card how Derrick Lewis, he was put into a terrible armbar. It was an awful armbar, but an armbar nonetheless by Josh Hokit, and Derrick Lewis didn't tap. And when you're facing a fighter like Justin Gaethje, who's a veteran and who has been through so many wars, there's no way that he's going to tap to an armbar, especially when he's fighting on the highest profile UFC card in history and fighting in what was going to be his last chance at an undisputed championship. And this is what further leads me to believe that Ilia punched himself out, because typically when Ilia has an opponent hurt, he tends to go for a higher percentage submission like that arm triangle he got against Bryce Mitchell. But instead, and this is just my guess, but I think he just punched himself out, throwing all those body shots in a desperate attempt to get that KO, and when Justin Gaethje didn't fold, Ilia was too winded in the moment to think effectively, and he ended up going for the lowest percentage submission he could have chosen. And now, moving on to the third round, this was the round where Justin Gaethje just completely took over. In this round, Justin Gaethje was jabbing Ilia Topuria up and hit him with that clean right hand right on the chin that dropped Ilia, even though it was technically not counted as a knockdown for some reason, and we all thought that Ilia Topuria, he was done and over with there. And it was in this round where Justin Gaethje started landing tons and tons of cumulative damage, right? Those right hands, those collar-tie uppercuts that Justin Gaethje likes to throw, he kept on landing those, and every time Justin Gaethje hit Ilia Topuria clean, Ilia Topuria, even if he was advancing, he just started to retreat. And the thing with Ilia is, he's always been a fighter who really has no choice but to go forwards. Ilia Topuria has looked as dominant as he is up until this point because he's always going forwards, he's always pressuring, and because he's pressuring, he's able to throw all those power shots. But when Ilia Topuria can't pressure, well, there isn't much he can do. Ilia Topuria does not have an outside game. Ilia Topuria can't fight like someone like Islam Makhachev or Alexander Volkanovski. Ilia Topuria does not stick and move. He doesn't pop a jab and then move laterally. He doesn't throw round kicks to the body, inside low kicks, front kicks to the body. You know, those strikes that you throw to dissuade your opponent from moving forward. And frankly, there's no way that we could have known this prior to this fight, because in every fight that Ilia Topuria has had, he's always been the hammer and not the nail. He's always been able to move forward, pressure his opponent up to the fence, and set up his boxing and get the highlight reel KO. And in hindsight, if you go back and watch Max Holloway's fight against Justin Gaethje, you would see that Max Holloway, he was sticking and moving. He was popping a jab and then moving laterally. He was throwing spinning body kicks. He was throwing shots that would intercept Justin Gaethje when Gaethje was moving forward. And I think that this fight against Justin Gaethje has exposed a critical weakness in Ilia Topuria's striking arsenal. He can't fight on the back foot. And then, of course, at the end of the third round, the doctor was called in to look at Ilia Topuria's swollen and busted up face. And while the doctor didn't stop the fight there, he could have stopped it there. The fight was already over, right? Like, Ilia's face was completely busted up after that knockdown. And frankly, I feel like they should have stopped the fight in the third round because Ilia Topuria, he ended up taking way too much damage in this fight. Like this is life-changing damage that he's taken. There was no need for a fourth round. And now Justin Gaethje, he is the undisputed lightweight champion. And now, this throws a massive wrench into the UFC's plans. Because the UFC, they obviously planned on having Ilia win here. And the plan probably was going to be something like Ilia Topuria knocks out Justin Gaethje, and then he comes back and he fights Aiemann, and if he wins against Aiemann, he might move up to welterweight and fight Islam Makhachev. But now, that is totally out of the question. Ilia Topuria, when he comes back, if he comes back, he's going to the back of the line here. He is completely and totally out of any GOAT discussions whatsoever. And there is a significant chance that if we do see Ilia Topuria fight again, he's not going to be the same. And there's two reasons why I say that. First, he took an entire career's worth of damage against Justin Gaethje. Like Ilia Topuria, that was a Tony Ferguson level beating that he took from Gaethje there. And that kind of damage, it changes fighters. And it especially affects fighters who need to pressure forward, like Tony Ferguson. And that's because even if a fighter keeps on telling himself, hey, I need to go forward, I need to pressure forward, I need to get into brawls, the body just says, no, I need to avoid that. Like, can we please not do that anymore? There's just a physical reaction, I think, that keeps fighters from taking more and more damage like that, especially once they take a traumatic beating, like Ilia Topuria took from Justin Gaethje. And then second, Ilia Topuria, he built not just his own personal brand, but his own confidence around being an undefeated finisher. He's always marketed himself as being this undefeated superstar, basically a Conor McGregor 2.0, who not only gets all of these highlight reel KOs, but is also on top of that undefeated, and speaks 3 languages. He was supposed to be this undefeated phenom, this future GOAT of the sport, who might go on to surpass the likes of GSP and John Jones. The type of fighter who would combine the star power of Conor McGregor with the legacy of somebody like GSP or Mighty Mouse, right? But now, well, he's just another guy. He's just another dude. And sure, he's an incredibly talented dude. He's still a phenomenal fighter. I mean, this fight was a war. It was incredibly competitive. But when you lose to Justin Gaethje, a guy who was previously 0-2 in title fights against Charles Oliveira and Khabib, and was always seen as that sort of always the bridesmaid, never the bride type of fighter, on the same level as somebody like a Dustin Poirier. The kind of fighter who was always put into the lists of greatest fighters to never be an undisputed UFC champion. And now Justin Gaethje, he is an undisputed champion. Well, that is significantly damaging to your legacy. And Ilia himself knows that more than anybody else. And that is something that can just crush your confidence as a fighter. Especially when you're somebody who has as much self-belief and frankly, narcissism as Ilia Topuria. And frankly, I can see Ilia Topuria having a sort of Ronda Rousey-like fall-off from this point onwards. Both Ronda Rousey and Ilia Topuria built this brand of invincibility and sort of bought into their own hype. And frankly, I can see Ilia Topuria either retiring right after this fight and never coming back, or coming back a year later after his face heals up and all of that, and losing to somebody like Charles Oliveira in a rematch, or even somebody like Aquilin Salkild. And actually, that's who I want Ilia Topuria to fight next. Ilia is probably going to need at least 8 to 9 months off, if not more. And by that time, the lightweight division is already going to have moved on far past him. And at that point, I think that somebody like Aquilin Salkeld will be ranked in that sort of top 5 or top 7 area, and that would be a perfect co-main for a numbered event or a good, solid fight night main event. And then, as for Justin Gaethje, he needs to fight Aiemann. He needs to fight Aiemann. That fight needs to happen. Arman Tsarukyan deserves his title shot, and he needs it as soon as possible. I don't think Justin Gaethje took all that much damage in this fight, so hopefully we can see that fight getting booked maybe 3 to 4 months from now. Let's say 4 months from now. Yeah, let's do that. I would like to see those two fight in October, maybe in Abu Dhabi, right? Like, that would be a good Abu Dhabi numbered event headliner. So yes, congratulations to Justin Gaethje for stopping the hype. And Ilia Topuria, tough luck. Tough luck, man. And may this be a reminder to all of you to, number 1, not bet on mixed martial arts. And number 2, never, ever, ever wife up a woman from Miami. And now, moving on to the other big shocker of the card, let's talk about Ciryl Gane knocking out Alex Pereira. And now, as I said at the beginning of this video, this was a 50-50 fight, but almost everybody that I know was picking Alex. And really, it's no wonder why. After getting that KO win over Magomed Ankalaev in such dominant fashion to regain the light heavyweight title, he frankly seemed like he had so much momentum and, for lack of a better term, aura, that I think everybody, including myself, saw him just steamrolling the heavyweight division as well. And yeah, sure, Ciryl Gane, he's a fast striker, he's quick for heavyweight, but he's quick for heavyweight, right? He outpoints heavyweights, who are, with the exception of the top 5, blobs. But in this fight, Alex Pereira looked like he was completely lost on the feet. In the first round, Ciryl Gane was just moving faster than Alex, he was landing clean right hands that Alex wasn't seeing coming, and it seemed like Alex just didn't have any method to get his offense going at any point whatsoever. And if you go and check the total strikes that Alex Pereira landed on Ciryl Gane, you would see that he landed 3 strikes to the head, 1 strike to the body, and 8 strikes to the legs. And the Alex Pereira that showed up here against Ciryl Gane, he looked like the Alex Pereira that showed up to the first Magomed Ankalaev fight. He seemed too focused on hindering Ciryl Gane's movement with the calf kicks. However, since Ciryl Gane was fighting out of southpaw, those calf kicks weren't effective. I mean, the only calf kick that I saw Alex Pereira land clean to Ciryl Gane throughout the entire fight was the stepping calf kick with the lead leg. And as we all know, that kick does a little if no damage. It's more of a point scorer than anything. And you can't get into a point fight with Ciryl Gane. Throughout this entire fight, Alex Pereira's stance was very square on, like it usually is. And with a square stance, you're opening yourself up to straight shots like the jab. And throughout the entire fight, Ciryl Gane was landing that southpaw jab. He was landing that left straight, right down the pipe. And we knew that this was going to happen. It's just that I personally thought that Alex Pereira was going to do what he did in the Magomed Ankalaev rematch, where he went shin to shin with his own rear leg calf kick. But no, Alex Pereira didn't show that kind of urgency that he did in the Magomed Ankalaev rematch. Instead, he was just kind of complacent. He just kind of stood there in front of Ciryl Gane, not even really feinting or doing much at all, while letting Ciryl Gane jab his face off. And then, if you go back and watch the finishing sequence, you would see that the shot that Ciryl Gane dropped Alex Pereira with was that southpaw jab. It was just a quick, stiff power jab. And that was all. And that dropped Alex Pereira. And then Ciryl Gane followed up, of course, with strikes to the back of the head. At least 10 elbows to the back of the head, maybe 5 hammer fists, I don't know. All to the back of the head. Daniel Cormier in commentary said, "Oh, those shots were to the side of the head." Shut up, Daniel. And then, when Alex Pereira got up, he was still on shaky legs, and Ciryl Gane just swarmed him, came in with the finish, and the ref waved it off. And now, first, I'll start off with what this means for Ciryl Gane and the heavyweight division. But yes, this is going to set up the rematch with Tom Aspinall with a title unification bout. And I just saw Tom Aspinall reacting to this fight and saying he's willing to fight Ciryl in September in Paris. And I think that's completely fine. And personally, I do think that Tom Aspinall still wins that fight. Although after seeing Ciryl Gane here actually develop finishing potential and power here, I think that fight is going to be more 50-50 than ever. Although I still think that Tom Aspinall's wrestling is going to be good enough to get Gane down and hopefully submit him. But needless to say, it would be a pretty terrible look for the UFC if Ciryl Gane were to become the undisputed heavyweight champion. And that's because Ciryl Gane, he's lost to Francis Ngannou, who left the UFC, alright? And then he's lost to John Jones. And he lost in dominant fashion there. So Ciryl Gane becoming the undisputed heavyweight champion would basically just completely negate the idea that the UFC has the baddest man on the planet. Because the baddest man on the planet would probably still end up being either John Jones or Francis Ngannou, right? And then let's talk about what this means for Alex Pereira. I can see Alex Pereira just retiring after this fight, and frankly, I hope he does retire. Because he's nearly 40 years old. He has frankly nothing, he really does have nothing else left to prove. That phrase, he has nothing else left to prove, that gets thrown around quite often, but in Alex's case, that's really the case. Because there's nowhere for him to go from this point onwards. He has a firmly established legacy at light heavyweight that he would be risking if he were to go down and fight Carlos Ulberg or, Magomed Ankalaev in a trilogy fight for something like an interim title, right? And he would have to cut 50 pounds to make that weight while being nearly 40 years old. Now that he's lost his heavyweight, there's no John Jones fight for him. There's no Tom Aspinall fight for him. And frankly, he's just another contender now. I mean, who can you match Alex Pereira up against at heavyweight? There's really just two options, okay? Or maybe three. There's Alexander Volkov, Sergey Pavlovich, and then Josh Hokit. And after seeing Alex Pereira up here at heavyweight and seeing how, frankly, slow he is, seeing how hesitant he seems to throw power shots, I think he might lose to all three of them. And I'm not kidding when I say that. I can see Volkov jabbing Alex Pereira's face off because Alex doesn't move his head. Volkov is taller and longer than him and does throw a lot of jabs and a lot of straight shots, even though Alexander Volkov himself, he's quite slow. And then, of course, with Sergey Pavlovich, his hand speed would be a significant problem for Alex, even though I can see Alex getting off a couple calf kicks here and there, since Sergey is an orthodox fighter. And then Josh Hokit, he has the wrestling. He has the wrestling threat, even though he is, frankly, not just a light heavyweight sized fighter, but a middleweight sized fighter. And Josh Hokit's just a fat middleweight. And we saw that with how outsized he was by Derrick Lewis. But still, lighter man skill, and Josh Hokit, he's young, he's bouncy, and he's got a decent chin. So I don't like that matchup for Alex either. I genuinely think that Alex Pereira should retire after this fight. And frankly, if he were to take one more fight, it should be, and I'm going to get some flack for saying this, it should be the trilogy fight with Izzy at light heavyweight, or maybe at a catch weight of 220 pounds or 215 pounds, just as a double retirement for both of those guys. Alex, you've given so much to the sport. You've given us so many crazy highlights. You truly did strive for greatness, and frankly, at this point, I just want you to enjoy the rest of your life without taking too much excessive damage when you're already 40 years old. And now moving on to another fight down the card, and specifically the feature fight of this card, let's talk about Sean O'Malley versus Aiemann Zahabi. And we all saw this outcome coming, right? We all knew that Sean O'Malley was being set up to get a highlight reel, plain old, good old Sugar Show KO here against the 38-year-old Aiemann Zahabi, who was coming off of two arguable robberies against Chito Vera, who was on a 2-fight losing streak at the time, and the washed ghost of Jose Aldo, who re-retired right afterwards. And the first round of this fight was probably the most boring part of this entire card, because all Sean O'Malley was doing in that first round was pressuring Aiemann Zahabi and throwing the right hand to the body. Just a straight right hand to the body. And then all Aiemann Zahabi was doing was backing up and throwing the inside low kick to Sean O'Malley's thigh. And seriously, Aiemann Zahabi, what was the game plan going into this fight? I see here on the stats website that you threw 31 leg kicks and you landed 26 of them. And at no point did Sean O'Malley seem bothered by any of them. And look, I know hypothetically, probably the game plan was something like, all right, we need to get Sean O'Malley out of orthodox because his right hand, that's the big power punch. Even though, in the end, Sean O'Malley ended up catching Aiemann Zahabi with a straight left and then a right hook from southpaw. But anyways, the game plan probably was like, we need to damage Sean O'Malley's legs. We need to take away his movement. Why would you throw inside low kicks to the thigh then? You need to be throwing calf kicks, right? You need to be throwing calf kicks to the outside of Sean O'Malley's leg. It's so hard to get any power behind a step-in inside low kick. It's frankly just a point fighting tool. And a pretty bad one at that, because the judges don't score this kind of non-damaging shot that much. And that is doubly true if you're constantly backing up. Like, it is virtually impossible to get a ton of power behind a low kick if you're constantly backing up, because you can't plant your feet to throw. However, because Aiemann Zahabi was fighting so defensively in the first round, I actually did think that this fight would go to a decision. But no, in the end, Sean O'Malley, he caught Aiemann Zahabi with the left hand into the right hook, and yeah, he flattened Aiemann Zahabi out. And he ended the fight with like a quick salute, even though Aiemann Zahabi wasn't fully out. But, it was a good walk-off KO. The good old Sugar Show KO that we all used to miss back from when, Sean O'Malley was fighting total cans on his way up. And yeah, Sean O'Malley, he's earned himself another title shot, right, against Petr Yan, who he should have lost to, but ended up getting a decision awarded to him, And, yeah, he's going to get another title shot. Are you guys happy? Are you guys excited to go and watch Petr Yan versus Sean O'Malley too? And I mean, that is a pretty good fight, to be fair. That is going to be a pretty fun fight. But, I think we're going to watch the guy who got dominated twice by Merab go and fight Petr again. And frankly, I can actually already see there being a interim title fight that involves Sean O'Malley at this point, because Petr Yan, he just posted recently that he's getting surgery. So, who knows? Maybe we'll see Sean O'Malley versus, I don't know, Umar Nurmagomedov, or maybe the winner of Corey Sandhagen versus Mario Bautista at some point in the near future. Especially if the winner is Corey Sandhagen, because I know that Sean O'Malley and Mario Bautista, I think they're training partners at the MMA lab. But yeah, the Sugar Show is back, guys. The Sugar Show just KO'd a 38-year-old who was coming off of a series of robbery decisions. Merab, Petr Yan, please save us. Anyways, moving on to Josh Hokit versus Derrick Lewis. Yeah, we all knew this was going to happen. I mean, Derrick Lewis, he threw 8 strikes throughout the entire fight. And frankly, I feel like it was a bad look that Josh Hokit wasn't able to finish Derrick Lewis earlier. Because, I mean, Derrick did look somewhat more in there and more durable, I guess, than he looked against Waldo Cortez Acosta. Like, he looked like he didn't want to quit as much, but in the end, he just threw no volume. He barely did anything. He was just kind of a punching bag for Josh Hokit, who beat the crap out of him. And the one thing that stuck out to me throughout this fight was, of course, that really, really bad armbar attempt by Josh Hokit, who was using that gable grip instead of, just, grabbing the wrist in order to secure the armbar. And here's the thing. With an armbar that deep, even if you have bad technique, you're typically able to secure it by just cranking on the arm, right? By just going, right? But the thing is, Derrick Lewis's arm looked so much thicker than Josh Hokit's arms. And frankly, it was like Derrick Lewis's arm looked like it was twice the size of Josh Hokit's arm. Frankly, the same size as like one of Josh Hokit's legs. And the fact that Josh Hokit wasn't able to secure that submission against Derrick Lewis, first it showed that his jiu-jitsu technique, it's still not good by any means. Like, he's very much a wrestler and not a jiu-jitsu player or submission artist, right? But also, it showed how undersized Josh Hokit is for heavyweight. As I said, Josh Hokit, he is basically just a middleweight who doesn't diet. And while we did see Pereira lose in the co-main event, I do think that a lot of middleweights should consider just eating junk and moving up to fight at heavyweight. And here I'm thinking about guys like Gregory Rodriguez, who has never been able to crack the top 10, or even Joe Pyfer, who, while he's typically more well known for his power, and there's no knowing how well that would translate up to heavyweight, but here I'm thinking more about his grappling, because if Joe Pyfer were to move up to heavyweight, he would probably be the best technical grappler in that entire division. You know, perhaps barring Tom Aspinall. And now, moving on to another fight down the card, we had Mauricio Ruffy versus Michael Chandler. And as everybody knew, Mauricio Ruffy knocked out Michael Chandler in the first round. He actually got 2 knockdowns. Okay, cool. And yeah, it was just a brutal beating. Chandler did nothing in this fight. He just danced around at range, did nothing. He was doing like jumping jacks. And even when he was shooting for takedowns, because he did shoot for 3 takedowns, it was kind of like there was no drive behind them. He didn't get low at all. Mauricio Ruffy just stuffed him with ease. And Ruffy just knocked him out. It was just like... I'm so glad. I am so glad. Thank you to the White House staff. Thank you to the UFC for not giving Michael Chandler an opportunity on the microphone to give a crappy promo afterwards. And yeah, Mauricio Ruffy knocked out Michael Chandler. This was a gimme. This was the biggest lock of the card. And frankly, there's just not much else to talk about. And now moving on to the next fight down the card, we had Bo Nickal versus Kyle Daukaus. And I'm going to speed through this one because I'm getting super tired. It's 3 a.m. over here in Japan. And I just have to say, I severely underestimated Bo Nickal's development in mixed martial arts. He has grown leaps and bounds since he got knocked out by Reinier de Ridder. I thought that this fight was going to be the one boring fight on this entire card. I thought that Bo Nickal was just going to wrestle Kyle Daukaus and just hold him down. And for the first half of the round, it definitely looked like that. Bo Nickal took Kyle Daukaus down, and Kyle Daukaus, he didn't try to get up. He just closed his guard and tried to hug Bo Nickal tight to keep Bo Nickal from posturing up and landing ground and pound. And frankly, that's how I thought this entire fight was going to play out. But then the referee stepped them up, even though Bo Nickal was landing some decent ground and pound. He was landing some good elbows, which I thought was a good development in Bo Nickal's game because he's always struck me as more of a control guy rather than a ground and pound guy. So that's good to see. And after the referee stood them up, Bo Nickal landed a perfect shot right on Kyle Daukaus' chin and knocked him out. And frankly, I remember when everybody was saying, oh, Bo Nickal, he's going to be completely done after he lost to Reinier de Ridder. But no, Bo Nickal, he's built himself back up, and now he's on a 2-fight KO win streak. And Kyle Daukaus, like, he's not top-tier competition. He's not, like, some sort of guy who's going to be, like, highly ranked at any point in his career. He's already 34 years old, but Kyle Daukaus, he's not a bad fighter. He's not a bum by any means. He's decent. And Bo Nickal made easy work of him. And frankly, I wouldn't mind if Bo Nickal gets another shot at the rankings after this fight. And I think this fight shows just how much a fighter can grow from a loss. Prior to losing to Reinier de Ridder, Bo Nickal was basically just sort of like a pure wrestler type, right? Even though he had that 1 KO win over Val Woodburn, who was brought in at the last minute to lose to him. But leaving that aside, Bo Nickal, he's definitely developed as an MMA fighter. He's not just a pure wrestler anymore. He's confident to strike, and he can also submit you. He's a genuine threat now, I think. And I would like to see him fight somebody like a Jared Cannonier next. And now, moving on to the final fight, or should I say the first fight of this card, let's talk about Diego Lopes versus Steve Garcia. And I'm going to be brief. This was just a brutal chin mogging from Diego Lopes. Steve Garcia was piecing up Diego Lopes in the first round, landing that straight left hand over and over again and getting Diego's attention. And guess what Diego Lopes did in the second round? He just charged forward and traded with Steve Garcia in the pocket, caught him with a left hook, dropped him, and then finished him off with ground and pound. This was just a pure chin and durability mogging from Diego Lopes. Not much technique at all. Just run in, bum rush the guy, and just wing shots at him. I don't think Diego Lopes threw a single jab throughout that entire fight. He was just always going for the kill. Just left hook, right uppercut, left hook, right hook. And just, he's so fun to watch. But it makes sense why Diego Lopes, he's the kind of fighter to get picked apart by somebody like an Alexander Volkanovski. But anyways, thank you for listening to this extensive review of the UFC White House card. And let me know if you want me to do more of these sorts of card reviews after cards happen, sort of like how MMA Guru and Bedtime and Lucas Tracy do them. Because frankly, I don't like producing content like this because I feel like, it's like sort of low effort compared to some of the other content that I put out. But, this kind of content, it's the easiest to manufacture. And as you can already tell, this is already like a 42-minute video. It's going to be 43 minutes once I'm finished recording this. So it's going to get a lot of ad revenue as well. Especially since, this is a hot topic right now. But anyways, thank you for listening until the end, and goodbye.